I never imagined I'd be one of those guys spilling his life story on the internet, especially with all the drama and messiness involved. But here I am, pouring it all out because, honestly, I need a place to vent. Maybe I'm just hoping that someone, somewhere, can tell me I'm not losing my mind, that other people have gone through this level of chaos. So hang on tight because things are about to get real. Emily and I had been married for 5 years. On the surface, we looked like a typical happy couple. We lived in a decent apartment right in the middle of the city, both had stable jobs and a decent social circle. I work in Penang, the usual grind, deadlines, clients, office gossip. Emily, meanwhile, is in fashion, handling branding or something that sounds more glamorous than it is. But lately, things between us felt off. The first hint of that sinking feeling came at a party some friends threw. They just had a baby, so it was one of those gatherings celebrating how grown-up everyone had become. I was making my usual rounds, talking to folks I barely knew, when I spotted Emily across the room. She was deep in conversation with this younger guy, Eric, who had just started working at her company. This guy was all smiles and charm, leaning in way too close, saying something that made her laugh. Really laugh, the kind of laugh she used to say for me back when we were dating. I tried to shrug it off. I've never been the jealous type, or at least I didn't think I was, but something about the way she looked at him got under my skin. It didn't feel friendly. It felt way too personal. She had this glow, that spark in her eye I hadn't seen in a long time, especially not when she looked at me. On the way home, I brought it up. I didn't want to sound like some paranoid husband, but I had to know what was going on. Emily, what was with you and that guy, Eric? I tried to ask casually, even though I was gripping the wheel a little too tight. She rolled her eyes, like she always does now whenever I try to have a real talk with her. Oh, come on, Jason, she sighed. He's just a coworker. We were talking about work. Why are you suddenly getting so paranoid? Paranoid? I snapped back. I'm not paranoid. I just know what I saw, and it looked like you were really enjoying his company. She just looked out the window, jaw clenched. You're overthinking it. It was just harmless fun. Honestly, Jason, maybe that's the problem. We don't have fun anymore. And that's when she threw the bombshell. She didn't bring up date nights or vacations to fix things. No, that would have made sense. Instead, she went straight to suggesting we should open up our marriage. Just like that. No warning. She said it as casually as if she were suggesting a new takeout spot. An open relationship? I stammered, feeling my voice crack. Are you serious? She didn't even blink. I'm just saying it might be what we need to feel alive again. We're in a rut, Jason. Don't you feel it? We're just coasting. I was floored. This was the same woman who used to talk about commitment, how she believed in monogamy. Now she was acting like sleeping with other people was some sort of self-help exercise. I'll admit, the thought of saying yes to make her happy crossed my mind. I was desperate to save what we had, or at least what I thought we had. But my gut was screaming that something wasn't right here, that something deeper was going on with her. Still, I was weak, too scared to lose her completely, so I agreed. Fine. Let's give it a shot. The moment I said it, I felt sick. I wanted to take it back, but the look on her face. She looked relieved. It made me nauseous, but there it was. I'd agreed, and now I was trapped in this nightmare. The next day, that uneasy feeling grew. I tried convincing myself we could handle this, that we were mature enough to work it out. So I did what any man in my position would do. I called my buddy, Noah. He's an old-school, no-nonsense guy who never holds back. We met up at this dive bar we used to haunt. The place hadn't changed. Cheap beer, dim lights, sticky floors. Noah listened as I poured it all out, shaking his head like I was telling him I was about to jump off a bridge. Dude, he said, taking a long drink. You're crazy if you think this open relationship thing is going to fix anything. All it's going to do is give her a free pass to cheat without calling it cheating. I wanted to argue, tell him he was wrong, but deep down, I knew he was right. Emily was halfway out the door, and I was too blind to admit it. But I couldn't say that, not yet. So I shrugged, pretending it didn't bother me. I don't know, man. Maybe this is what we need. Maybe it'll help us figure out what we want. Noah just gave me this look, like I was the world's biggest fool. And maybe I was because, truthfully, I hated every bit of it. I despised the idea of Emily with someone else, even if I'd technically given her permission. That night, after I got home, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself this was going to work, that Emily wasn't just using this as a way to fool around while pretending to stay married to me. But there was this voice in my head telling me something was seriously wrong, and from there, things started to unravel. The open relationship was supposed to save us, but instead, it led us down a path darker than I ever expected. To be honest, the moment Emily first brought up the idea of an open relationship, I was already halfway out mentally. But it wasn't until a few days later that everything really went downhill. This is where everything I thought I knew about her and us fell apart. It was a random Tuesday morning. I just finished making coffee and was getting ready to leave when I saw Emily had left her phone on the kitchen counter. Normally, she's glued to it like it's her lifeline, so seeing it sitting there was odd. I don't even know why I looked. Maybe I was just curious, or maybe that gut feeling was pushing me. I didn't go far, just a quick glance at her notifications. But that was all it took. Right there on the lock screen was a text that hit me like a punch to the gut. "Can't wait for our date tonight. See you soon." My heart dropped. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself it was just a work thing, a joke, or I didn't even know what I was hoping for. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't the open relationship she'd pitched to me. This was her setting up a date with some other guy, right behind my back. I could have easily smashed her phone to pieces right then. The anger was that intense. But I forced myself to stay calm. At least that's what I kept telling myself to do. Instead, I took a screenshot of the text, sent it to my own phone, and deleted all traces. Yeah, I know, sneaky, but I needed solid proof because, if I confronted her without it, Emily would just lie through her teeth like it was nothing. That night, after a day of stewing over everything, I tried to act normal, but it was tearing me up inside. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't get my mind off that message. It kept flashing through my mind, the way it was written so casually, like meeting some other guy was just part of her regular Tuesday schedule. It made me feel like a complete idiot for ever agreeing to that open relationship garbage. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. So I decided to dig deeper. When Emily hopped into the shower that night, I took her phone again and scrolled through her texts. That's when I found the thread with this guy, Adam. From the looks of it, he was some hotshot entrepreneur who just moved to the city. A smooth-talking, good-looking guy, probably with women lining up to be with him. And their messages, they weren't just flirty, they were explicit. Stuff like, "Can't wait to feel your lips on me again," and "Last night was unforgettable." Yeah, so much for our little agreement. My wife was having a full-blown affair, and here I was, trying to be the understanding husband, thinking we were trying to save our marriage. I wanted to confront her right then, but my anger was too raw. I knew if I blew up, she'd just use it as an excuse to twist it around on me. So, I held back, deciding to wait and plan my next steps. But I couldn't just sit on it, either. That weekend, I met up with Noah again, throwing back whiskey shots like they were water. When I told him what I'd found, he just shook his head. "Man, you should never have gone along with that open relationship idea," he said, slamming his glass on the bar. "All you did was give her the green light to cheat without calling it cheating." "I know," I muttered, staring into my drink. I don't know, man. I thought maybe it would fix things, but she's not even trying. She's just using it as an excuse to go after some other guy." "Then why the hell are you still here?" he demanded, narrowing his eyes. "Get out, Jason. End it before she tears you down even more." But I wasn't ready to just walk away. Not yet. I needed something more. Closure or maybe revenge, I don't know. But I knew I had to confront her eventually, only this time, I had to be smart about it. A few days later, Emily started putting together this big birthday party for herself. She seemed almost giddy about it and kept mentioning that Eric, the guy from her office, would be there. That made me anxious because I couldn't shake the feeling that Eric and Adam were just different versions of the same problem. Still, I kept my mouth shut, biding my time and waiting for her to slip. One night over dinner, I decided to test the waters. I casually brought up the open relationship thing, pretending like I was genuinely interested in how it was going for her. She froze for just a second. This flash of guilt crossed her face, but then she quickly brushed it off, playing it cool. "Oh, it's been interesting," she said, taking a sip of her wine. "But honestly, I haven't really explored much. I've just been so busy with work." Sure, busy getting her thrills on the side. But I just nodded, acting like I believed her. "Good to hear," I said, forcing a smile. "I've been taking it slow, too." She glanced up at me, studying my face like she was trying to figure out if I was hiding anything. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd caught on, but she just shrugged and went back to her pasta. As the party approached, I couldn't shake the feeling something was up. One night, I overheard her whispering on the phone in the hallway. She thought I was asleep, but I was wide awake. "Yeah, I can't wait either." "No, it'll be perfect timing," she said, her voice low and eager. And that's when it all clicked. This birthday party wasn't just a party. It was her cover for meeting up with Adam. So I did some digging. Turns out she had a date planned with him that night. I guess she assumed I'd be too busy mingling with her friends to notice if she slipped away for a few hours. But she didn't know I was already one step ahead. I wasn't just going to sit there and let her make a fool of me. No more pretending, no more playing along. It was time to take matters into my own hands. I just had to figure out how to catch her in the act, how to stop her from worming her way out of it with more lies. Once I knew about the date, I couldn't sit still. The thought of Emily with that Adam guy was driving me up the wall. There was no way I was going to let it slide. Not this time. If she thought she could sneak around behind my back and pass it off as saving our marriage, then she had another thing coming. I spent hours piecing through their messages, finding out exactly where and when they planned to meet. Adam had picked one of those upscale bars in the trendy part of town, the kind of place where young professionals gather to sip overpriced cocktails and put on airs. I decided that's where I'd confront him. I wanted him to see I wasn't some clueless, passive husband. When I arrived, the place was packed, full of people dressed to impress. Meanwhile, I was sweating, tense, my fists clenched so hard it hurt. Then I spotted him, Adam or Chris or whatever the hell he called himself, leaning against the bar, scrolling on his phone, looking smug and carefree. Just seeing him there made my blood boil, so I walked right up to him without a second thought. "Hey you, Chris," I said, my voice barely containing the anger. He looked up, surprised at first, and then I saw the recognition in his eyes. Yeah? Do I know you?" I leaned in close enough that he could feel my anger. "Yeah, you know exactly who I am. You're about to meet my wife, Emily. That ring any bells?" His eyes widened a bit, caught off guard, but he still had that cocky glint, like he thought he could talk his way out of this. "Look, man, it's not what you think," he started. But I cut him off. "I don't care what you think this is," I growled. "I'm telling you, stay away from her. If I find out you even text her again, I'll make your life a living hell." "Got it." For a second, he looked like he was going to push back. There was a flash of defiance in his eyes, like he thought I was bluffing. But he must have seen I wasn't about to back down because he eventually raised his hands in surrender. All right, man, I hear you," he said, though he had this annoying smirk that only made me angrier. I left that bar feeling like I'd done something, but let's be real. I knew it was just a band-aid on a bigger problem. The real issue was Emily, not this guy. He was just the latest in whatever had gone wrong between us. But I needed a distraction, something to numb the pain of watching my marriage fall apart. So, I did the only thing that seemed to make sense. I signed up for a dating app. I swiped through profiles without much thought, just going through the motions, until I matched with a woman named Lauren. She was attractive, confident, and, most importantly, she wasn't Emily. We started chatting, and before I knew it, we were exchanging flirty banter back and forth. Things escalated quickly, and without thinking too much about it, I invited her over to my place that same night. Honestly, I wasn't thinking clearly. Anger and frustration were steering me more than anything else. When Lauren showed up, it felt like a breath of fresh air. She was carefree and full of energy, Someone who wasn't lugging around the lies and baggage that Emily had been carrying like some twisted badge of honor. We settled into easy conversation, had a few drinks, and things heated up pretty fast. This wasn't just about the physical side, although God knows I needed that release. This was about feeling wanted, about being with someone who actually seemed to care that I existed. We moved to the bedroom, practically tearing our clothes off as we went. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about Emily or the mess that was waiting for me once this moment was over. It was just Lauren and me, and in that fleeting time I felt free. But deep down, I knew this was just a temporary escape, nothing more than a band-aid on a deep wound. While I was with Lauren, Emily was out on her own date with Adam or Chris, or whatever the hell his name was. I half expected her to stay out all night, honestly, but to my surprise, she came home earlier than I thought. I was still in bed with Lauren when I heard the door open. My stomach dropped for a second, but then something inside me shifted. Why should I care? She was the one who pushed for this open relationship. She was the one sneaking around with her new lover. Emily walked into the bedroom, probably expecting to find me asleep or zoned out in front of the TV. Instead, she found me there in bed with Lauren, both of us barely covered by the sheets. Her eyes widened, and her face turned a deep red as shock quickly morphed into fury. "What the Jason?" she screamed, her voice shaking with anger. "What the hell is going on here?" I sat up slowly, not even bothering to cover myself. "Oh, now you're mad? That's funny, Emily." I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're the one who wanted an open relationship, remember? Or is it only okay when it's you sneaking around?" Her face twisted with rage, and for a second, I thought she might actually throw something at me. "I never agreed to you bringing someone into our bed," she shouted. "Oh, but it's just fine for you to go out and screw some random guy behind my back? Is that the deal?" I yelled back, my anger spilling over. "I saw your messages, Emily. I know all about Adam or Chris or whoever the hell he is." She froze, and I watched the color drain from her face as she processed what I just said. You went through my phone?" she stammered, trying to shift the blame onto me, but I wasn't letting her get away with it. "Yeah, I did," I said, swinging my legs out of bed and pulling on my jeans. "And you know what? I don't regret it because it showed me exactly who you are." From there, the argument erupted into full-blown chaos, both of us shouting things we couldn't take back. Everything we'd kept bottled up, every bit of resentment, every betrayal, every hurt feeling, came flooding out all at once. She called me controlling, said I was suffocating her. I fired back, calling her a selfish, lying cheat who couldn't keep her promises or her legs closed. It was raw, brutal, and left us both emotionally wrecked. Eventually, the yelling died down, and a heavy silence hung in the air. Emily just stood there, looking at me with tears in her eyes, like she was seconds away from falling apart. I think I should leave," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yeah, maybe you should," I replied coldly, feeling like my heart was being torn to shreds. Emily packed a bag in silence, grabbed her keys, and walked out without a backward glance. As for Lauren, she quickly dressed, mumbled some excuse about not wanting to get involved in my drama, and slipped out the door. Couldn't blame her. I barely knew what I was doing anymore, let alone how to explain it to anyone else. In the days that followed, I tried to make sense of the disaster my life had turned into. Emily and I exchanged a few cold, matter-of-fact texts to figure out how we'd divide our things. She told her friends that we tried the open relationship idea, and it had just failed. I told my friends I was done with playing the nice guy, and Noah, always blunt, told me to take this as my wake-up call and move on with my life. But here's the thing, I don't know how to just move on. Part of me wants to hate her, to burn every bridge between us, to never hear her name again. But then there's this other part, a part that remembers the good times when things were simple, when we were happy. And that's the part that makes this whole thing so twisted. Because even after everything that happened, I'm not sure who I'm angrier at, her for betraying me, or myself for letting it get this far. After Emily walked out that night, taking the last broken pieces of our marriage with her. I was left standing in the ruins of what was once my life. I felt like I was staring at the ashes, wondering how things had gotten so messed up. The first few days after she left, I just went through the motions. I dragged myself to work, come home, drink more than I should, and repeat the same miserable cycle. But after a week of that, I realized I couldn't keep drowning myself in self-pity. I needed to pull myself together, if only for the sake of appearances. So, I threw myself into work like a man possessed. Early mornings, late nights, anything to keep myself from spiraling back into the chaos that Emily had left in her wake. I work at a Penang agency, and people started noticing I was more focused than ever. The truth was, I just needed something to drown out the silence. Sophie, one of my coworkers, who's always had a bit of a soft spot for me, started helping out more. She'd linger after meetings, ask if I needed anything, maybe try to offer some silent support. Honestly, I could see what she was doing, and I appreciated it. At least someone seemed to care. Sophie's the type who listens without judging, and right now that was more than I deserved. She didn't pry, but she knew something had gone down. "Hey, if you ever need to talk or grab a drink, I'm here," she offered one afternoon, her voice gentle. "Yeah, maybe I'll take you up on that," I replied, managing a faint smile. But I didn't take her up on it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to pull someone else into the mess my life had become. Instead, I reached out to someone who knew me before all this madness started. My old college buddy, Ben. We hadn't talked in years, but one night, scrolling through my contacts in a drunken haze, I shot him a text. Surprisingly, he responded right away. "Hey, man, let's catch up. How about a hiking trip this weekend? Get some fresh air. Clear your head," he suggested. A hiking trip was the last thing I wanted, but at that point, maybe it was exactly what I needed. I threw some gear into a bag and met up with Ben on Saturday morning. The hike was brutal, but it was exactly the kind of reset I was desperate for. Surrounded by trees and open sky, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. At one point, as we were resting near a lookout, Ben turned to me and said, "All right, man, spill it. You've been walking around like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." And so I did. I told him everything, from Emily's suggestion of an open relationship to the affair with Adam and every piece of pain in between. I surprised myself with how easy it was to finally say it all, no holding back. Ben listened quietly, nodding here and there, letting me unload. "Look, man, I know it hurts right now, but you did the right thing," he said once I was done. "Sometimes people just change, lose themselves along the way, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But now you've got to focus on what's next for you." It was the best advice I'd heard in years. For the first time since Emily dropped that bombshell about wanting an open marriage, I felt a tiny bit of clarity. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual friends that Emily had moved in with her friend Sarah. Sarah is one of those people who acts supportive but secretly judges everyone, so I'm sure Emily was getting an earful. Apparently, Emily was struggling. Sarah told a mutual friend that Emily's been crying on her couch, drinking too much, trying to piece together how everything had fallen apart. Part of me felt a little sorry for her, but mostly I was just exhausted. She made her bed, and now she could lie in it. But then, just as I was trying to find some semblance of normalcy, life threw me a curveball. Back at work, my boss handed me a major project, a product launch for one of our top clients. They wanted me to lead it, said it was a make-or-break deal for the agency. So I poured myself into it with everything I had. Late nights, weekends, whatever it took. It felt like I was finally clawing my way out of the wreckage. My team started noticing my dedication, especially Sophie. She'd stop by my desk, offer to help, bring me coffee, just be there. Then one evening, after a grueling day at work, I swung by a bar near the office to shake off the stress. As I was working on my second beer, I glanced up and, to my surprise, spotted Lauren. The same girl I'd invited over during that chaotic chapter with Emily. She noticed me and made her way over, flashing that warm smile like I was a long-lost friend. "Hey, stranger," she teased, sliding onto the bar stool next to mine with an easy grin. Been hiding out on me, have you? Yeah, something like that, I replied, not really wanting to dive into all the messy details. Besides, being around her felt oddly soothing. Maybe because, unlike Emily, she didn't come burdened with all that extra drama. We ended up chatting for hours, diving into random topics and catching up on each other's lives. She filled me in on her job, her dream to start a business, and I told her a bit about the campaign I'd been working on. It surprised me how effortless it felt, almost natural in a way I hadn't expected. Eventually, as the drinks piled up, she leaned in closer, her hand finding its way to my arm. You know, Jason, she murmured, her voice low and gentle. I'm really glad we ran into each other again. I could see where this was leading, and honestly, I was tempted, more than tempted. But I couldn't ignore the caution simmering underneath. I wasn't ready for another emotional roller coaster. So, instead of taking her home, I told her we should take it slow. Maybe catch up again sometime soon. She gave me a playful wink, clearly not put off by my caution, before heading out. So here I am now, stuck between the wreckage of my past with Emily and the possibility of something fresh with Lauren. Sure, Emily's still lurking in the corners of my mind, but I'm beginning to see the faint outline of a path forward. I'm not claiming I'm healed, not by a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, I'm ready to start picking up the pieces and figure out what comes next. Because if there's one thing this mess has taught me, it's that life doesn't pause just because you've been gutted. You've got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when it feels like every step cuts you open. And who knows, maybe this time I'll actually find a way to make sense of it all. It had been a few weeks since Emily stormed out of our apartment, and I'd been telling myself I was finally starting to piece my life back together. The new work routine, catching up with old friends, and spending time with Lauren. All of it helped keep my mind off the wreckage of our marriage. But life's got a cruel way of yanking you back down when you think you're finally getting ahead. Just when I felt like I was moving on, Emily slipped back into my life like a shadow I couldn't shake. It happened one Wednesday evening. I'd just finished a late meeting when my phone buzzed with a text from her. Seeing her name on the screen made my heart jolt. Hey, can we talk? I think we need to clear the air. I stared at the message for what felt like forever, my thumb hovering over the reply. A part of me wanted to tell her to disappear, that she'd done enough damage already. But another part of me, a weaker, more foolish part, still craved some sort of closure. Against my better judgment, I typed back, yeah, okay, when and where? We arranged to meet at this little cafe we used to go to when we first started dating. The place was packed with memories, mostly good ones. I showed up a bit early, nerves churning in my gut. The air smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon, only making the tension in my stomach worse. When Emily finally walked in, it hit me like a punch to the chest. She looked different, worn out, like she'd been fighting her own battles. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Hey, she said, taking the seat across from me. Thanks for agreeing to meet. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. I wasn't there for pleasantries. I needed to know what she wanted. She took a deep breath, hands fiddling with her coffee cup. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began quietly. I know I messed up. I just needed some space to figure things out. And honestly, I didn't expect it to spiral like it did. I couldn't help it. I laughed, cold and bitter. Space? That's what you call sleeping with someone else behind my back? For God's sake, Emily. Her eyes welled up with tears, but I wasn't about to let that soften me this time. I know, she stammered. I was confused, okay? I felt like our marriage was suffocating me. I thought maybe an open relationship could help me find myself. Find yourself by hopping into bed with Adam or Chris, or whoever the hell he was. That's your idea of self-discovery? I shot back, my voice low but edged with anger. Her face crumpled, and for a split second, I almost regretted saying it. Almost. But then, unexpectedly, she didn't lash out or try to twist it around on me. She just looked down, speaking in barely more than a whisper. I know it was wrong, Jason. I don't expect forgiveness, but I just needed to explain. I was terrified. I thought I'd lost you, that we were just existing side by side, and I panicked. As much as I wanted to hate her, something about her expression, genuine remorse maybe, started chipping away at my anger. We sat there, breaking down every piece of our relationship. I told her about the betrayal, the pain, how reading those texts shattered me. And for once, she actually listened. Somehow, amid the tears and raw anger, there was this odd sense of relief, like we were tearing down the walls we'd built over the years and finally seeing each other clearly. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. By the end, we were both emotionally drained. And then she dropped it. "I don't know if we can ever go back," she murmured, looking down at her coffee. "But maybe we could try. Take it slow, work on trust. I'm not asking for everything back at once. Just a chance." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to walk out, leave her sitting there with her regrets. But another part of me, the part that remembered the good times, the laughter, the love we once had, couldn't entirely let go. "Maybe," I said at last, my voice barely audible, "but I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Emily. And without trust, what's the point?" She nodded, brushing away a tear. "I get it. But maybe we can just be friends for now and see where that goes." I didn't answer. I just stood up, left some cash on the table, and walked out. I needed air, needed space to think. The thought of rebuilding with Emily, of trying to salvage what was left of us, it terrified me. But somehow, it was the first time in months I'd felt even a glimmer of hope. That night, I called Ben. He listened patiently as I poured out all my confusion, anger, and that tiny bit of hope. "Look, man," he said, "you don't have to figure it out right now. Just take it one day at a time. But don't let her screw you over again." It was solid advice, but putting it into practice was a whole other story, especially with Lauren waiting in the wings, ready to fill the empty space Emily had left behind. I kept seeing Lauren, and honestly, she was the distraction I needed. She was fun, lighthearted, and, best of all, she didn't come with all the heavy baggage Emily did. We'd go out for drinks, hit up concerts, and, for a while, I could almost forget the mess my life had become. But every time I laughed with her, every time we ended up back at her place, I felt this nagging guilt, like I was somehow betraying Emily, even though we weren't together anymore. It was twisted. The thing is, Lauren was starting to get serious, hinting that she wanted something deeper. And while I enjoyed spending time with her, I wasn't sure if I was ready to dive back into another relationship, especially with Emily's memory haunting my every move. One night, after another long day at work, I found myself at a bar with Lauren once again. We were laughing, chatting, and then, suddenly, she leaned in and kissed me. It was the kind of kiss that makes you lose yourself completely, where everything else just fades away. But as we pulled apart, the only thing on my mind was Emily, our conversation at that cafe, the fragile possibility of fixing what we'd broken. Lauren saw the hesitation in my eyes and pulled back, a flicker of hurt crossing her face. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I took a deep breath, running a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of everything hanging in the air. I don't think I can do this right now. There's still a lot I need to work out." Lauren looked at me, her face caught somewhere between understanding and disappointment. "Jason, I really care about you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But if you're still stuck on your ex, maybe you're not ready for this." Her words hit hard, and even though I knew she was right, hearing it out loud stung. I watched her walk away, and in that moment, I felt truly alone. No Emily, no Lauren, just me, standing at this crossroads, unsure of which path to choose. I wish I could say I had it all together, that I knew what I was doing, but the truth is, I'm just a guy trying to make sense of a life I helped mess up. Whether it's Emily, Lauren, or learning to stand on my own, I have no idea where I'm headed. But maybe that's okay. With the product launch fast approaching, for the first time in a while, I had some purpose. I poured myself into the campaign, late nights, weekends, giving it everything I had. After everything that had happened, I needed this win more than I could admit. It wasn't just about impressing my bosses or landing a bonus. I needed to prove to myself that I could build something solid, something that wouldn't fall apart. And damn, it paid off. The launch was a huge success. The clients were thrilled. My team was buzzing. And I even caught a glimmer of pride in my boss's eyes as we wrapped up the event. For once, I felt like I had solid ground under my feet. Amid all the congratulations and handshakes, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in a long time. Naturally, I invited Lauren to the launch party. She'd been this bright spot in my life, helping me see that maybe, just maybe, there was life beyond the wreckage with Emily. Things had been getting more serious between us, though I still tread carefully. As much as I liked her, I couldn't shake that nagging voice in my head whispering Emily's name. When Lauren arrived, she looked incredible, catching the attention of everyone in the room. I felt proud to have her by my side and, for once, allowed myself to relax and enjoy the moment. We mingled with my coworkers, her laughter blending with the sounds of glasses clinking and conversations buzzing around us. It all felt perfect, until I looked up and saw Emily walk through the door. I hadn't told her about the launch. Hell, I didn't expect her to show up, but there she was, standing in the doorway, looking as out of place as I felt. For a second, I was frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. Her eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on me and Lauren, her expression shifted shock, hurt, maybe even a touch of jealousy. It was hard to say. She quickly composed herself and made her way over, wearing that calm, polished look she'd always had. "Jason," she greeted me with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to congratulate you. I heard about the launch, and I'm really proud of you." "Thanks, Emily," I replied, keeping my voice steady, or at least trying to. "Oh, and this is Lauren." Lauren smiled and extended her hand, and to her credit, Emily accepted it gracefully. But the tension between us was thick enough to feel, and I sensed Lauren stiffen beside me, her grip on my arm tightening. After a few painfully polite exchanges, Lauren excused herself to grab another drink, leaving Emily and me alone. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by laughter and celebration, yet it felt like we were the only ones in the room. "Look, I didn't mean to intrude," Emily said quietly, almost drowned out by the music. I don't know. I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm doing all right," I replied, keeping it casual, though a trace of bitterness slipped in. "Better than I was, at least." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm glad," she murmured. "I've been working on myself, you know? Therapy, trying to understand why I made those choices." "That's good, Emily," I said, and for the first time I meant it. Maybe seeing her like this vulnerable, broken, but trying softened something in me. Or maybe I was just exhausted from holding on to all that anger. Her eyes met mine, open and raw in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. "I'm really sorry, Jason, for everything. I thought I needed more, but what I really needed was to figure myself out without tearing you down in the process." Hearing her admit that hit me harder than I expected. We stood there, talking quietly in our little corner, like the rest of the world had faded away. She told me about her therapy, how she realized she'd been chasing something to fill a void that wasn't my fault. I shared how hard it was to let go, about how Lauren was helping me move forward, even though the fear of getting hurt again was still there. Despite the pain and the history between us, there was still a spark, something that lingered between us, but it wasn't enough to undo all the damage that had been done. We both knew that. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Is there any chance for us?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I felt like I didn't want to go back. Too much had happened, too much damage had been done. But I also knew I couldn't just erase her from my life completely. "Emily," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I care about you. I always will. But I think we both need some distance. I can't keep living in the past, and I think you need to find yourself without me there." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I understand," she said. "I think you're right. I need to focus on me for a while." And just like that, we reached an understanding, an unspoken agreement. We weren't going to try to piece together what was broken, but maybe we could still be in each other's lives in some way. Not as lovers, not even as close friends, but as two people who had once shared something meaningful, even if it was over now. As I walked away from Emily and back to Lauren, I felt lighter, like a weight I'd been carrying for months had finally been lifted. Lauren looked up at me, searching my eyes, and for once, I didn't feel torn. When the party ended, I took Lauren's hand, leading her outside into the cool night air, the city lights casting a warm glow around us. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. "Are you okay?" Lauren asked softly. "Yeah," I replied, squeezing her hand. "I think I finally am." I knew there would still be hard moments ahead. I knew I'd probably run into Emily again, and the past would still sting sometimes. But right now, I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, with Lauren, with my work, with my life. As we walked down the street together, her laughter mingling with the sounds of the city, I realized that maybe the future wasn't so scary after all. I was done being haunted by the past. From here on out, I was choosing to move forward one step at a time.